Following up on some Battletech combined arms, about 2 weeks ago I pushed up to the playlist here in the archive, top 3 best tanks in the game. And I made my case for the top 3, and of course opening it up to my fellow mech warriors and mech commanders in the comments, your vote for the top 3. Now, this was a balance of kind of speed, armor, destructibility, and battle value. Naturally, this is a sliding scale, a sliding matrix. I'd love to have a very fast tank with lots and lots of weapons, lots of armor for like 500 battle value. But this is the matrix of Battletech and the design rules of Battletech. You've got to make concessions and you've kind of have to look with what you're going to take. And I want a framework for a second leading into this tank. We're going to look at the Burke. This idea that if we look at mechs as purely a weapons delivery platform, just the weapons, it's a little bit more expensive or a lot more expensive than vehicles because of mech design, the things that they can do and their components. Vehicles are a lot cheaper for the same or greater firepower, but that concession comes with they're very vulnerable to motive hits and certain criticals and other rules navigating terrain. So when you look at kind of a mech versus a vehicle with comparable weapons, the vehicle is a lot cheaper. If you can navigate the challenges, or call them disadvantages, then they bring a lot of firepower to the table. But we want to be mindful as we move into the upper echelon of vehicles. There's kind of this threshold where now they're getting kind of pricey, and we need to be really careful with what we can bring. Okay, the Burke. This kind of builds on the Shrek. It's one of my favorite tanks, the Shrek, because you're mounting 3 PPCs. The Burke starts things out with 3 PPCs. Imagine being able to fire that every single turn. That is just one. Now, I like to take 2 or 3 tanks of the same classification in a game. 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is some. This idea of redundancy, right? We've got range, you're running and gunning, I'm moving. There's a greater chance if I hit you with 1 PPC versus 3, 4, 5 PPCs. The more shots, the better. So by taking multiples of 2 or 3 tanks, whatever that classification is going to be based on the battle value that you're playing, it increases the odds to hit. Well, if I just take 1 Burke or 1 Shrek, that's 3 PPCs. In the case of both tanks, but now moving into the Burke, if I take 2 of those are 6 PPCs. Light as a hunter-killer squad, if a light mech comes into range, even with your modifiers, because you're running and gunning in range, if I tag you with 1 or 2 or 3 of those PPCs, you're going to hurt. If I'm in a defensive position, hold down, I'm not moving, I'm not going anywhere, and you're moving forward with your assault mech, you're slow, I'm going to hit you with 6 to 9 PPCs. That is a crazy amount of fire. If you're playing with the optional rules, that with some other firepower could very much be a pilot check to make sure you don't fall down. Now, the Burke takes things a little bit further. We could say it's a development of the Shrek, where now we're also mounting a long-range missile 10-pack. That's interesting, right? If we look at LRM tech, 5 is okay. 5 on a light mech is to harass and snipe and do things. 5 is for if you've got a couple of extra tonnage or just something to do while you're on the way in, right? The Grasshopper is a great example. The Grasshopper is a mech. I'm there to zap with all my energy weapons, trying to close to medium laser range, utilize the jump jets. But on the way in, I've got that 5-pack just to do something to fire in. Then we get to 20 packs on the opposite side. They're heavy. The ammo is heavy, a good amount of reloads. You kind of need to either mount a single one on the heaviest mech. We see that with the Cyclops and the Atlas. Or you become a dedicated missile boat like the Archer or the Longbow, looking at heavies and assault classifications. But then we've got 10s and 15s. And 10s and 15s based on the tonnage give you a good volley of ammo and enough of a spread. An LRM 10-pack is a great entry point. You also get some indirect fire. So to now mount that with the PPCs, meaning we're sinking in the same range, if I've got 2 or 3 Burks, now we're eating 6 to 9 PPCs and 3 packs, 2 to 3 packs of LRMs. That's a significant amount of firepower. What do you like, Fritz? Sign me up. It's got good armor, but it's slow. This is a slow tank. You're going to be playing defensive on there. And the disadvantage to this tank is because it's so slow, if you get overrun, you're not redeploying and you don't have any short-range weapons to like hold your own or drive something off. So if a light mech is going to blitz you, which that doesn't happen too often because they don't want to risk it, but in the combat, if you're playing in City Fight, City Tech, and something manages to close, or ironically, the bane of these tanks is mechanized infantry. If there's 3 Burks kind of hold down, and I can fly over and drop off some infantry with 2 Karnoffs, I can fly high up, down. That's a major challenge to these tanks. They don't have any short-range weaponry. They don't have any anti-infantry weaponry. So very, very vulnerable to certain situations of being overrun. Now, how you go about this, you got to have a tactical question in that maybe if I'm playing on a hex map, I hang out in the corner to the left or right corner. That limits the area of approach, and I just blast everything. Maybe I have something else second working in tandem. This is where the Burke pays what I call the Battletech tax. Certain units are really, really focused, really, really potent. And if you can keep them in that lane of potency of Tactica, they're just going to obliterate. But as soon as they move out of that lane, meaning your opponent can catch you or take advantage, they just fold very, very quickly. So the tax is additional battle value that you need to pay to ensure that. And I don't want to pay so much battle value. Look, if I've got 3 Burks, I can make them absolutely bulletproof. But I've got other things in my list, in my lances, that I need to do, that I need to be aware of. So we want to do the absolute minimum possible. What that looks like, and again, this is kind of a sliding scale for battle value, some infantry. Take some infantry, non-mechanized, and put them with the Burks as a shield. That's going to give you some short-range work. That's going to allow you to drive off other infantry. If I'm putting down infantry and they're going to be static, then I'll also take a couple of field guns. Just take a few AC-5s, put them down. Or maybe if I'm building a fire base, take a thumper, light artillery. Second upgrade, a little bit more pricey in battle value, would be to put a demolisher tank. 1 demolisher tank, hold down on the turret, 2 autocannon 20s. I'm still somewhat vulnerable to infantry, but mechs, I'll blast them off. If you make it to close, you got to eat those 2 autocannon 20s. Plus, the Burks will be firing at the short range or point blank, taking those penalties and modifiers. Ideally, maybe 2 stands of infantry and a demolisher tank. That is in addition to it. So now we have a tank that you're paying for that, but you're also paying what I call, again, this Battletech tax to get that in effect. But doing that, you establish a fire base, you establish what's going on, it's going to wreck. Now, I find the Burke, based on the speed and the scenario, I wouldn't say this is an all-taker tank. The equivalent would be what I call a trooper mech in Battletech, and we've pushed up that definition and explored that in the Battletech playlist. Trooper mech is like T-Bolt, Jenner, Catapult. I don't know what the Wolverine. I don't know what the mission is. I don't know the hex map we're going to be playing on. I'm building my lance, and then we'll roll for random stuff. Wherever I wind up and do, those mechs are they're just troopers. They're just solid. They just work really, really well and excel really, really well. Other things are very focused based on the mission or based on the hex map. The Burke is not a trooper tank. It's a long-range support. It wants to stay in place and just blast and blast away. And it particularly loves open or semi-open tracts of land, areas, hex maps, terrain. So City Fight, City Tech, there's too many places to hide. It's hard to get long lanes of fire on a very building-rich map. There will be a few based on roads and cross sections and junctions, but likewise with jump jets and buildings, there's ways to bypass them. But kind of the classic Battletech hex maps where it's open terrain with pockets of elevation of hills and mountains and some forests and some rubble, those are just going to be perfect. The Burke is going to be deadly there. So something to consider, an excellent, excellent tank, but be ready. Be ready for the hate that your opponent is going to bring to it. They're going to focus on really trying to destroy these units and nullify them. And I can't blame them. I can't have 6 to 9 PPCs firing every single turn, throwing down 20 to 30 missiles, direct or indirect. Just, you can't. We can't have that. We have to have some way to deal with that and get your attention. The finishing tactica is, as a mech warrior, as a mech command, when you have units that attract attention, right? If I'm taking my stalker and running it down the center of the table, you got to deal with it. Whether you effectively deal with it and blow it up and I'm sad face, or you can't deal with it and I overrun you happy face, you have to deal with it. So while you are committing to dealing with this stalker or dealing with the Burks, certain battle value is going to be committed to that. My other forces, lances, combined arms, Karnovs, infantry, mechanized stuff, whatever that's going to be, then that battle value is going to have a little bit more breathing room or a little bit more tactica, not forever, a couple of rounds, a couple of turns, whatever. Can I utilize that? So that's also an important tactica with the Burke and other similar high value, high damage. I can't let this thing go on the table unchallenged for X number of turns. How do we utilize that?